Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here with another PB&J card class. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you two different cards, variations, using one of our newest Scenic stamps called Snowy Settlement. So here is a look at the two cards, just a little peek at the two cards that we will be creating with this stamp. And I just wanted to give you some different ideas of how you can use this stamp. So here is a look at the actual stamp that we will be using, 40-864. Snowy Settlement. And to begin, I'm going to be stamping using my MISTI stamp positioning tool onto Bristol smooth cardstock. This is by Strathmore, and I'm coloring directly onto my stamp using Tombow dual brush pens. I'm using the brush tip of the marker. Now I have sped this up, but I am just coloring directly onto the stamp, sort of working section by section. So here you can see I have done the trees. And then I am going to stamp this down onto my cardstock. Now, the reason I'm using this Bristol smooth cardstock is that it is very great for if you want to go back in and do any blending of something you have stamped with the Tombow dual brush pen. So I just have a paintbrush and some water here, and I'm just blending out what I have stamped, just lightly sort of smoothing it around, smoothing it out with some water on my brush. And instantly you will have this gorgeous watercolor look to your card. Now I do like to work, like I said, in sections because I think that is easier for me to control than where the water goes and what I am blending at the same time. You can do this with any of your water-soluble markers. The only thing I would not recommend doing it would be with like alcohol-based markers like Copic markers. This technique works best with the water-based markers. So next I'm going to move on to the little house here, little cabin, and I'm coloring that with a brown, getting the fence, and I am not going for an exact look or precision stamping on this. I wanted to have almost like a vintage, very loose watercolor look. So I've stamped that and I'm grabbing my paintbrush with just some water on it, and I'm just lightly sort of painting over that area, letting it blend a little bit. Also along the roof line, letting that blend down a little bit. Now I do keep it in the stamp positioning tool while I am doing this. That way I can do this sort of section by section or layer by layer. Another way you can try to do this is if you want to color the whole stamp and then lightly mist with water and then stamp it down, you can. But I find this way works better for me because there is some detail to the cabin and the fence, and if I don't mist that just quite right, I might get a blob there. So this is the way I like to do it. I have a little bit more control then with my paintbrush when I go back in later. I'm adding a little bit of a light blue to the snowy areas, and then I will go back and just lightly blend that with my paintbrush. And just right here, I feel like this is such a peaceful scene. Would make a really pretty, just a light, simple card. You could definitely stop right here, add your sentiment, and this is good to go. But I do want to show you some additional ways you can keep building upon what you have stamped, so I will do that now. For example, here I'm going to take just a darker color and put it onto some portions of the little cabins or houses. Just for some extra shadow, so I'm stamping that down, and then I will blend with my paintbrush, just starting letting that mix, not going for anything exact at all. But I do love how that adds just a little bit of depth. Same thing here with the trees. I'm going to go back with some more green, sort of a limier green to liven things up a little bit, and then I will blend that some more. You can see there just barely on camera I have a paper towel, so right above that is my cup of water. So I do get my paintbrush wet in the water and then pat it dry on that, not totally dry, but a little bit on that paper towel, and that helps me not to go in with too much water. Just gives me a little bit more control there. So I added in a little bit different shade of blue there. Now I've taken it out of my stamp positioning tool and I'm actually just coloring right onto an acrylic block with that blue marker, and I'm going to pick that up with my paintbrush and use that to sort of paint in the skyline here, mostly just so I can get in close to the trees. Now I am using care to try not and touch the trees too much with the water on my paintbrush because I don't want those to start blending up into the sky. You can't see it too much here, but it is just kind of a subtle look and helps me get the blue close to the scene. I can even take that, while it's still a little bit damp, take that marker directly to the paper and then blend it out. Again, working in small sections so I can blend it out before it really starts to kind of soak into the paper. And again, this is where having that Bristol smooth paper is key. It will really make all the difference in success with this technique. But I just love how easily you can have this gorgeous winter watercolor scene. So I'm just kind of smoothing that out into the background. I'm also going to use an ink blending tool with a foam pad and a little bit of ink. That is Cobalt Ranger Archival ink. I'm just picking based on the color. That is a color I really love. Applying that using a circular motion, starting off the edge on my scratch paper and working on to my paper. And I'm also going to add a little Toffee Crunch ink down here in the corners, so to give it a little bit of a vintage feel. Now, I did really like how this looked here, but I felt like I wanted to give it sort of a more depth to the image. So I have grabbed this stamp. This is from our Snowy Village set. And I am just stamping it here to give us sort of a foreground, which then pushes back that stamping we already did back even further. And I think this is, for me, what really finished things off. Now, because I didn't plan this ahead of time, I am stamping it a few times to sort of cover up those trees that are more in the background, just to darken it up. I'm also going to color with my marker right there, just right on my stamp positioning tool. I guess probably because I'm being lazy, and it also works good as a palette, and paint in a little bit of that foreground ground actually right there by the trees. And then I'm actually also going to take my marker directly to the trees. I promise that's what I'm doing behind my head. So sorry about that, but here we go. Right onto the trees in any of those places where the background is sort of showing through the stamping, just to be sure that it doesn't look transparent in any of those areas. So I'm just taking that marker and coloring right on top to darken it up. I don't have to do every little branch, of course, but just a little bit here and there. Finish things nicely. And then I'm going to add just a little bit more of that Toffee Crunch ink blending here to this corner, just to sort of ground that foreground stamping. And a little bit darker blue up in this corner to balance the sort of weight of that inking I just did down at the trunks of the trees. To finish this off, I die cut the panel using our zigzag stackers die and stamped my sentiment, and this winter scene is complete. Now I wanted to give you another idea. Oh, and here's that Snowy Village stamp that I use to stamp those trees in the foreground. Now I wanted to give you another idea, another way to use the same stamp, this New Village Scene stamp, Snowy Settlement, but using these same techniques. So for this I'm not going to use the whole stamp. I love stamps that are large enough that you can use them in lots of different ways, different sections of the stamp. I'm going to use this on a vertically oriented card, and so I'm using the same techniques though. I colored onto the stamp for the trees, and I am blending that out with some water. I'm going to work section by section. Here I'm going to color onto the little cabin, and that's something that's really nice when you're using markers with your stamps. You can just color the portions you want to use, so you have a lot of control over what you are actually using with the stamp. So I'm going to blend this out here with the water just like I did before. A little bit here on the roof line. I'm going to add that darker layer. This is kind of going to stamp in there. Well, some of that is still a little bit wet, so it will kind of blend on its own a little bit too. But I'll use the brush to help move it around where I want it, but not looking to make things perfect. I definitely want this to look watercolored. Going to add in sort of the ground line or the snow line here with some blue. And I even can take that marker directly to where I'm working if I want to darken it up. And then I will blend that with my paintbrush. I think this would also look really beautiful as sort of a night scene if you wanted even to do it in all blues and dark colors like the silhouettes of the trees. Now to give this dimension, I'm using 40-714 before the snow to give some foreground stamping with this scenic stamping in the background. So I'm coloring directly onto this big large stamp with my marker. Now when you color onto a large stamp with a marker, it's not going to stamp very evenly because you're going to have the strokes of your marker on the stamp. So I'm going to stamp this a couple of times, and then I wanted to have that watercolor look, which is why I did use the marker. And then I'm just going to take my paintbrush and just really blend that out and let it look really loose watercolor. But I will go back and do some more stamping to get the detail of this tree because it really is a gorgeous tree. But you can see by stamping that in the foreground, automatically now you start to see some more depth and dimension to the entire scene. So I'm going to clean off my stamp here and reposition it. I did dry my panel where I had been stamping as well. I'm going to kind of layer this up here. Now here I want to really get the detail of the tree. It's so pretty. Just wait till you see it. So I'm going to use an ink pad. I'm using Ranger Archival ink. Again, continuing to work in my stamp positioning tool so I can kind of build up that color, stamp it more than once. But this Bristol smooth paper will also really get the detail of that stamp beautifully. And then I'm going to add one more tree here off to the side with an even darker color. I believe this is peat moss, but again, I'll list them all for you down in the YouTube description box below. All of the exact colors, the markers, everything I'm using will be listed down there. And I will link all of the penny black supplies over to our online store for you. So once I had that stamped, I really think I could have stopped right there. But I just felt like I wanted some more variety to these trees in the background. So I just grabbed my Sakura Koi Field Sketchbox watercolors. You could grab whatever you like to use, whatever watercolors you have on hand. And I'm just adding a little variation in the greens here on these trees. Now I think on this large one, it got a little bit blobby, but I'm going to put some snowflakes on top. I'll show you that to sort of try and fix that a little bit. But I do kind of like how that you can see more of the individual trees in the background. I'm going to do some ink blending up here in the sky. So using my ink blending tool with the foam pad, starting off of the edge and working my way on in a circular motion. And I'll use this Toffee Crunch down here on the bottom. And I've stamped my sentiment. I die cut it using our zigzag stackers die. And here I've just put some white acrylic paint onto my acrylic block, just a little dot of it, and I'm just picking it up with my paintbrush and putting some snowflakes on here. Now you could certainly splatter your paint on, but I don't know, I always manage to get like a horrible splatter in the worst place, so this is actually faster for me and calms my anxiety, snowflake anxiety. So here's a look at the finished card. I sure hope you enjoyed creating these two scenic cards featuring our newest stamp, Snowy Settlement. If you did, be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe. I have more scenic stamping coming for you, so hit that little bell notification so that you get notified when the next video uploads. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, as well as Instagram, our website, and blog, and all of those are linked for you down below as well. Happy stamping!